Warning: the following video contains explicit language which may be offensive to some viewers or inappropriate for children. The content within this video is intended for mature audiences only.
Hello and welcome to this video. I hope everyone's having fun. I hope everyone's doing good, and I hope the universe is treating you fairly. Today's video is going to be my thoughts and ideas on the horror genre. It is a genre that I enjoy and I love. Probably just coming in second, just a hair under science fiction. I have found through reading good horror that good horror isn't actually scary. Good horror is actually us looking at ourselves in a mirror and acknowledging all the imperfections, all the things we've done wrong, our atrocities to other humans. And this is just a manifest. These stories are just manifestations of this. Stephen King is a master at doing that. Peter Straub, not as good as King, but pretty good. V.C. Andrews gave us a lot of dirty, ugly things we don't want to think about when it comes to mental health. H.P. Lovecraft showed us what terrifying horrors of xenophobia, depending on which side of the pond you're on, misogyny, homophobia, transphobia, white privilege, and all of these authors in their stories let us look at ourselves, how we should deal with things, how we inappropriately do things, how we shuck off our responsibilities as sentient beings for things like pleasure and profit and stuff like that. I love horror, like I said. Big Stephen King, long time Stephen King fan. Tell a story about how I got introduced to Stephen King. I was introduced to science fiction by my mom. And by the time I got to high school, I was junior in high school, I had been diagnosed dyslexic, and in the 1980s, dyslexia and dyslexic people didn't have the leeway they're given now, what they have now, what they're allowed. And I forget what it's called now, because it's not allowances. I forgot. Which is weird, because my wife, being a teacher, uses this term all the time, and my brain just blanking out on it. That basically they bring the dyslexics up to an even playing field with the non-dyslexics. So but in the 80s, we didn't have that. So I read a lot. I enjoyed reading. Chicken is tearing up blackberry bush, which is not bad. They're getting the low-hanging fruit, which is good because they poop out the seeds later. Let me get back to what I was talking about. So I read a lot. I read a lot because I enjoyed reading. I loved reading. It was difficult. For me, that was my Mount Everest, to be able to read. And when I got to 11th grade, I had an English teacher, very good English teacher, a wonderful woman who passed in the mid-90s, late 90s from cancer, named Donna Bodie. Wonderful woman. Who basically, we had come to an understanding in her class because I was doing well. She had educated herself on dyslexia and implemented things in her own classroom before they had the standardized thing. So I'm in her class. I'm doing really well. I've got high marks. She was the kind of teacher that came in first day of school. She's like, look, if you're in my class, that means you have the ability to wind up in college. Not only college, a good college. So that is how I'm going to treat you. She came in, boom, gave you my brain, I'm not one talk. But basically it lined out everything for the semester. And I was always ahead. I used it as kind of like a cheat sheet to stay ahead. So when I was in class, I could read. And part of us coming to this understanding, and I was not allowed to read while she was lecturing. But if we were doing something that I had already gotten ahead in, turned in, it was cool. And there was one day I was in, while we were working this out, I was in teacher assigned after school. So I'm in her classroom and I'm reading. I was reading Frank Herbert's Dune, in fact. And she saw, and we had talked about things in my many occasions to wind up in her after school detention. And she had a hardback copy of Pet Sematary. And she was like, here, read this. I'm like, okay, whatever. I mean, and you take Pet Sematary and compare it to Dune. Pet Sematary is like a Frank Herbert chapter, or a Stephen King, paragraph. Well, it is a Stephen King book. Pet Sematary, that's weird. It's probably one of his thinnest books. So I was like, yeah, whatever. And she's like, I'm like, Stephen King, he's horror, blah, blah. I'm a science fiction nerd. I'm like, Heinlein, Asimov, Bradbury, kind of this as a junior in high school, I was this self-appointed, elitist read it, that just shows you how ignorant of the role I was at that time. She's like, read this. I'm like, well, it's horror. She's like, you're not going to find it scary. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, you're not going to find this scary because the way your brain is put together. You articulated fairly accurately Dune, the premise of Dune, story Herbert was trying to tell. You're not going to find Stephen King's writings, scary. You're going to find them intriguing and intelligent. So I was like, yeah, whatever. So she gave me the book and I read it and I really enjoyed Pet Sematary, and we discussed it. And that is what fueled my love. And from there I went to H.P. Lovecraft, And I did a video in which I discussed how I did in that same year of English, it was American Lit, a pamphlet to tour Arkham, Massachusetts, and Miskatonic University and all that. And I fell in love with it because of that looking at it. Then I read Carrie after Pet Sematary. I read Carrie, and I sussed out real quick that Carrie was about a girl's change from being a child to being a woman, to being a fertile woman that can get pregnant. And that's what Carrie's about. If you cut away all the supernatural, all the stuff, it is a magnification of the fears that a woman at that age, a girl making that transition into womanhood, goes through. Her feelings, the hormonal imbalances, and just the craziness of it all manifested. Then I read It, and it was the same thing. It told the story of the change from childhood to adolescence, then from from young adults to middle age, running side by side. And it is like that. V.C. Andrews is Flowers in the Attic, and that is a messed up book. But what that book is a reflection of is the inadequacies of mental health, education, stuff like that, and mental health treatment, I should say. Peter Straub, I think it's a Peter Straub, Stephen King co-author, but Floating Dragon. Floating Dragon is about the fears of getting old and dying, regardless of how much wealth, money, popularity you have. You cannot buy another second of life. You cannot. And and it's those things that fascinate me. A lot of the videos this month, I've talked about Alan Moore's work on Neonomicon and Providence Compendium. I think it's just when it was individual comics, it was called Providence, and when they mushed it together into a graphic novel is where they added compendium to the title. But Stephen King, or not Alan Moore, but his Watchmen, it's not a superhero book. It's about the lack and willingness of people to take responsibility, how power corrupts and absolute power absolutely corrupts. V for Vendetta is another one. It's about people becoming complacent and allowing the government to do what the government is going to do, and all governments, I don't care how benign they start out, how they begin with the best of intentions, whether it's a democracy, whether it is a monarchy, whether it is a communist state or socialist state. They start out, the leaders start out with the best of intentions, and it always devolves into an oligarchy, tyranny because of human nature, because of what we are. And that's what the horror genre brings out. And it shows us, it's letting us look at all the ugly marks, all the ugly imperfections, the things that we need to work on, the things we just can't fill up with cream, or things that we can't put makeup over, or the things that we've put makeup over that are showing through. And well written horror, that's what separates something like Stephen King's The Stand from a Friday the 13th movie or a Halloween movie or something like that. Those are just tits and ass and blood. That's all those movies are. There's no substance to them. There's no reflection. There's no learning. Those are, I think the term in the 80s was slasher films, but they were so impotent. What's funny is I was doing things that would probably be best suited in another video in high school, and to this day I am still a very much a sensual type person. I like the closeness, the touching and all that, but things like that, those movies like that, even though there was lots of nakedness, like I said, lots of titties and stuff like that, they were a turn-off to me because there was nothing to bite into. It was all whipped cream and no cake, all frosting and no substance, all sauce and no steak. And it's those kind is, and to this day I can't watch them, and it's not because they're going to scare me or give me nightmares. It's because they're, to me at least, they are intellectually insulting. But it's, that's another video. But the horror, and good sci-fi is the same way. Good sci-fi lets you look at the possible, something like the possibility of a Star Trek universe. Utopian, not that human beings would ever be happy in a utopia. The Matrix movies, they go in that, they're science fiction. They go into how humans have to have something to rebel against, have to fight against. And that's what the Dune novels, the Frank Herbert six Dune novels are about how human beings cannot, especially the last three, God Emperor Dune, Heretics Dune, and Chapter House Dune, about how human beings, generally speaking, have to have something to rebel against. We have to have a tyranny. We have to go through periods of tyranny and periods, we have to go through periods of dystopia and periods of utopia to be happy. It's just the way we are. We have to have something to challenge us, something to fight against. And if there's not something that's external to our own race, we feed on ourselves. And that's scary. And looping back around to good horror. That's what good horror points at, that we ultimately feed on ourselves. We have gotten to a point in our evolutionary state, we're at the top. And if we can't find something to fight, to defeat, to be better than we're going to kill each other. We're going to massacre each other. We're going to rape. We're going to marginalize. We're going to other. And that's what Lovecraft did in a lot of his stories. He othered people. He made monsters out of them. He made monsters out of women. He made monsters out of African Americans, Latinos, homosexuals, lesbians, trans people. He because he personally was so afraid and so intimidated by them that he wrote these fanciful stories. He did a good job, but it's a reflection of his depravity, his moral and ethical lackings. But in his time and his day, he was perfectly, it was considered, all that stuff that we figure monstrously today was normal. And it's we either learn from it and better ourselves, or we don't learn from it and we continue to eat ourselves. Like a Borealis, the snake eating its own tail. And that's what we are, that's what it feels like we're doing. Though, growing up during the Cold War, there are things that trouble. I've talked to college students, my wife, and other people, that the younger, I would say under 40 crowd, there are things that scares them that we're like, yeah, whatever. Because we grew up with knowing we could go to bed tonight and at 2 in the morning be vaporized. That's what we grew up with. So when there's threats and tyranny and war, genocide, we're like, yeah, that's horrible, but that's what we do to each other. That's what humans do. And, you know, it is what it is. And hopefully one day we can better ourselves. Maybe we're on the golden path, Leto Atreides' golden path, which was basically 3,500 years of ruthless, murderous, imperialistic tyranny, which forced human beings to dig deep in themselves and rebel. It's one of those things. And that's what good literature does. Literature in general does that. But horror and science fiction are, or I should say good horror, good science fiction, are all, that's what they're about. That's what they show. They show us those things that we need to work on, those things that we need to use to better ourselves. So I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your October. Planning some stuff for November. Hopefully November 1st I can have upcoming events for November, upcoming videos for November. So until then, everybody, remember, be a good human. Be good to other humans. Peace.
Hey, it's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?